The grand ballroom at the Metropolitan Hotel was a sea of elegance. 400 guests in evening gowns and tuxedos filled the space, champagne flowing, a string orchestra playing softly from the corner stage. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables decorated with white orchids and gold accents. Everything about my parents' 30th anniversary gala screamed success, wealth, and status. I stood near the back entrance, partially hidden behind a decorative column, wearing a simple black dress I'd bought off the rack for $150. My hair was pulled back in a basic ponytail and I wore minimal jewelry, just a watch and small diamond studs that had belonged to my grandmother. Dr. Amanda Chin. My mother's voice rang out from the main floor. I'm so glad you could make it. Let me introduce you to someone very special. I watched as my mother, Elizabeth Hartley, glided across the ballroom in her custom couture gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. At 55, she was still stunning, every inch the successful surgeon's wife she'd worked so hard to become. This, my mother said, her arm around my cousin Stephanie, is our successful daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been expecting something like this all evening. My cousin Stephanie, 26, beautiful, effortlessly charming, smiled graciously and shook Dr. Chen's hand. Stephanie just made partner at Goldman Sachs, my mother continued, her voice filled with pride. Youngest partner in the firm's history. We couldn't be more proud. That's remarkable, Dr. Chen said, genuinely impressed. Your parents must be thrilled. They are, Stephanie replied, shooting a quick, guilty glance in my direction. She knew exactly what my mother was doing. My father, Robert Hartley, joined the group, carrying 2 champagne flutes. At 58 he looked distinguished in his tuxedo, every bit the successful cardiologist he was. Talking about Stephanie's achievements? He asked with a broad smile. Unlike our real daughter who wasted her medical degree to play around with computers. Some people just don't appreciate the opportunities they're given. The group laughed politely, though Dr. Chin looked slightly uncomfortable. Several nearby guests had overheard and I caught them glancing around, probably trying to figure out who the disappointing real daughter was. I took a sip of my water and checked my watch. 20 more minutes until the keynote speech. 20 more minutes of invisibility before everything changed. Dr. Hartley, one of my father's colleagues, approached. Congratulations on 30 years of marriage. This celebration is magnificent. The venue alone must have cost a fortune. Only the best for my Elizabeth, my father replied, raising his glass. We spared no expense. 400 guests, full orchestra, 5-course meal prepared by a Michelin-starred chef. This evening represents everything we've built together. Success, status, a legacy to be proud of. Speaking of legacy, another guest chimed in. I understand your daughter followed in your footsteps into medicine? My mother's expression flickered with something. Annoyance, maybe embarrassment. We have 2 daughters actually. Stephanie here, she gestured to my cousin, has been like a daughter to us. She's achieved everything we hoped for. Smart, ambitious, successful. She's made us proud in ways we never imagined. And your biological daughter? The guest pressed, clearly not reading the room. Nina's somewhere around here, my father said dismissively, waving a hand vaguely. She had such potential. Full scholarship to Johns Hopkins Medical School. We were so proud. Then she dropped out in her 3rd year to pursue some technology venture. Broke our hearts, honestly. I didn't drop out, I said quietly from my position by the column, though no one heard me. I took a leave of absence to accept an acquisition offer. But they weren't interested in the details. They never had been. Such a waste, my mother was saying to a growing circle of guests. She could have been a surgeon like her father. Instead, she's living in a tiny apartment working on some startup that's probably going nowhere. We don't talk about it much. It's too painful. Stephanie looked increasingly uncomfortable, trying to extract herself from the conversation, but my mother kept pulling her back, using her as a shield against questions about me. I glanced at my watch again. 15 minutes. The evening had been like this since I'd arrived an hour ago. I'd walked in wearing my simple dress and my mother had looked right through me. Not intentionally ignoring me, she genuinely hadn't recognized me at first. When she did, she'd given me a tight smile and said, Nina, you came. That's nice. Try not to draw attention to yourself, please. This is an important night. My father had been even more direct. Glad you could make it. Your cousin Stephanie is here. You should see what real success looks like. Maybe it'll inspire you." I'd spent the past hour watching them parade Stephanie around like a trophy, introducing her as their daughter to anyone who would listen. Meanwhile, I'd stayed in the background, unnoticed, unacknowledged, exactly where they'd always wanted me. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice called from the stage, "if you could please take your seats, we're about to begin the formal program." The crowd began moving toward their assigned tables. I checked the seating chart posted near the entrance and found my name at table 42, literally the furthest table from the main stage, tucked in the back corner near the kitchen entrance. Stephanie, by contrast, was seated at table 1, right next to my parents. I made my way to my assigned seat and found myself with a group of distant relatives who barely knew me. They made polite small talk, asking what I did for a living. "I work in medical technology," I replied simply. "Oh, how nice," one aunt said, already losing interest. "Your parents must be disappointed you didn't finish medical school, though." "I found a different path," I said, not bothering to elaborate. On stage, the master of ceremonies was testing the microphone. I recognized him, James Whitmore, a prominent philanthropist who often hosted high-profile events. He was perfect for tonight's program, professional and well-connected. "Good evening, everyone," James's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Welcome to this magnificent celebration of love, partnership, and 30 years of marriage between Dr. Robert Hartley and Elizabeth Hartley." Applause filled the room. My parents stood and waved, playing the role of gracious hosts. "Tonight we have a very special program planned," James continued. "We'll hear from friends and family about the Hartleys' remarkable journey together. We'll celebrate their achievements, their contributions to our community, and the legacy they're building." More applause. I noticed several people at my table checking their phones, already bored with the speeches that hadn't even started yet. "But first," James said, "I want to talk about legacy. The Hartleys have built an impressive life. Successful medical careers, beautiful homes, strong family ties. But true legacy extends beyond personal success. True legacy is about contributing to the greater good, about innovations that change lives, about having the courage to forge new paths even when others don't understand." My heart started beating faster. This wasn't in the program I'd reviewed earlier. "Which brings me to tonight's keynote speaker," James continued. "The Hartleys requested someone who embodied the values they've tried to instill in their family: excellence, innovation, and dedication to improving lives. After much consideration, we selected someone who exemplifies all of those qualities and more." I could see my mother looking pleased, probably assuming the keynote would somehow honor Stephanie or reflect well on their family by association. "Our speaker tonight," James said, "is someone who started medical school with dreams of becoming a surgeon. But she realized her true calling wasn't in the operating room. It was in creating technology that would allow surgeons to operate with unprecedented precision and safety." My mother's smile started to falter slightly. A few people at the front tables were glancing around, suddenly interested. "At 24, she founded Nexus Medical Technologies," James continued, and I saw my father's glass stop halfway to his mouth. "She developed a surgical navigation system that has revolutionized minimally invasive procedures. Her technology is now used in over 3,000 hospitals worldwide and has contributed to millions of successful surgeries." My mother had gone completely pale. Stephanie was staring at the stage with wide eyes, then turning to look toward the back of the room where I sat. "Her company was recently valued at $1.2 billion, James said. "She employs over 800 people. She holds 43 patents in medical technology. And at 32 years old, she's considered one of the most influential innovators in modern surgical technology." The ballroom had gone completely silent except for James's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "it is my great honor to introduce the founder and CEO of Nexus Medical Technologies, Dr. Nina Hartley." 400 heads turned toward the back of the room, toward table 42, toward me. I stood up, smoothed down my simple black dress, and began walking toward the stage. The walk felt endless. Past table after table of shocked faces, past colleagues of my parents who'd dismissed me earlier, past relatives who'd pitied me, past the main table where my mother sat frozen and my father looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Stephanie caught my eye as I passed. "You should have told them," she mouthed. I gave her a small smile and kept walking. When I reached the stage, James extended his hand to help me up the stairs. "Dr. Hartley, welcome. Though I understand you prefer not to use your medical title professionally. I left medical school before completing my MD," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom. "So technically I'm not a doctor. Just Nina Hartley, CEO of Nexus Medical Technologies." I looked out at the sea of faces, at the parents who'd called me a disappointment, at the cousin they'd claimed as their successful daughter, at the hundreds of guests who'd spent the evening celebrating success without realizing they'd walked right past one of the most successful people in the room. "Thank you for that generous introduction," I continued. "And thank you to the Hartleys for hosting this beautiful event." When James reached out to ask if I'd be the keynote speaker, I was surprised. I didn't realize my parents had requested someone who embodied innovation and dedication to improving lives. Those haven't exactly been qualities they've associated with me. I could see my mother trying to signal me, probably wanting me to stop talking, to not air family issues in front of 400 guests. But I'd been silent for too long. "My parents are right about one thing," I said. "I did leave medical school in my 3rd year. They've told tonight's guests that I dropped out, that I wasted my degree, that I've been a disappointment. What they didn't know, because they never asked, was why I left." I pulled out my phone and displayed a photo on the large screens flanking the stage. It showed a surgical operating room with multiple monitors displaying 3D anatomical models. "This is the Nexus Nav system," I explained. "The technology one developed that's now used in over 3,000 hospitals worldwide. I invented it during my 2nd year of medical school, when I watched a surgeon struggle with a particularly complex tumor resection. The traditional navigation tools were clunky, imprecise, and required the surgeon to constantly look away from the patient." I clicked to the next image. A sleek AR-enabled headset integrated with surgical tools. I thought there had to be a better way, so I spent every spare moment coding, designing, testing. By my 3rd year I had a working prototype. Several major medical technology companies wanted to buy it. The largest offer was $375 million. Gasps rippled through the audience. My father had gone from pale to ashen. "I was 24 years old," I continued. "And I had a choice. I could continue medical school, become a surgeon like my father wanted, and watch someone else bring my invention to market. Or I could take a leave of absence, accept the acquisition offer, and use that capital to build something bigger. To create a company that would develop multiple innovations instead of just one." I clicked to the next slide. The Nexus Medical Technologies logo above a timeline of product releases. I chose the latter. I founded Nexus Medical Technologies with the acquisition money. Over the next 8 years, we developed 17 different surgical technologies. The Nexus Nav system was just the beginning. We've created tools for cardiac surgery, neurosurgery, orthopedic procedures, and minimally invasive operations that were previously impossible. Another slide showed a world map covered in pins. We're now in 73 countries. Our technology has been used in over 12 million surgical procedures. We've contributed to saving lives, reducing recovery times, and pushing the boundaries of what's medically possible. I paused, looking directly at my parents. My mother told guests tonight that I wasted my medical degree. My father said I was playing around with computers. They introduced my cousin as their successful daughter because they were ashamed of their real daughter's choices. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. "They didn't know," I continued, "because they never asked. When I tried to tell them about my first patent, they changed the subject. When I mentioned my company's series of funding, they said I should focus on real career prospects. When I invited them to our product launch at Johns Hopkins Hospital, the very institution where I'd studied, they said they were too busy." My mother was crying now, mascara streaming down her face. My father's head was bowed. "For 8 years, I said, I built a billion-dollar medical technology company while my parents told anyone who would listen that I was a disappointment. I revolutionized surgical procedures while they apologized for my life choices. I employed 800 people while they used my cousin as a surrogate daughter because their real one wasn't successful enough." I clicked to a final slide. A photo of me in a surgical observation room watching a surgeon use Nexus Nav technology to remove a brain tumor. "This was taken 3 months ago at Massachusetts General Hospital," I said. "The patient was a 7-year-old girl with an inoperable tumor. Except it wasn't inoperable, not with our technology. The surgery took 11 hours. It was successful. The girl is cancer-free and recovering well. I looked back at the audience. That's what I gave up medical school for. Not to play around with computers. Not to waste my degree. But to save lives in a different way than my father does. To innovate in ways that help thousands of surgeons help millions of patients. James stepped forward, perhaps sensing I was done. Dr. Hartley, Nina, has agreed to take a few questions if anyone has them. Hands shot up immediately. James pointed to a woman in the front row. Ms. Hartley, she said, standing, I'm Dr. Patricia Morrison, Chief of Surgery at Mercy Hospital. We've been using your NexusNav system for 2 years. It's extraordinary. I didn't realize. I had no idea you were Robert's daughter. Does he know you've been revolutionizing his field? He does now, I replied simply. Another hand. Nina, I'm Michael Chun from the technology sector. Your company's valuation, did you say $1.2 billion? As of our last funding round, I confirmed. Though we're private, so that number isn't public knowledge. Or wasn't until tonight. And you own? 63% of the company, I said. I've sold some equity to investors and reserved shares for key employees, but I remain the majority shareholder and CEO. I watched the mental math happening across 400 faces. 63% of $1.2 billion was about $756 million. I was worth $750 million, and I'd spent the evening at table 42 unnoticed and undiscussed. Stephanie raised her hand. When James pointed to her, she stood. Nina, I owe you an apology. Your parents have been introducing me as their successful daughter all night, and I went along with it. I should have corrected them. I should have told them about your company, about your achievements. You didn't owe them that, I interrupted gently. Stephanie, you've achieved remarkable things in your own right. Making partner at Goldman Sachs at 26 is genuinely impressive. You earned that. My parents' decision to use you as a shield against questions about me isn't your fault. But I knew, she said, her voice cracking. I knew what you'd built. I've known for years. I should have said something. Why would you? I asked. No one was asking about me. No one was interested in my work. You were getting praise and recognition you deserve. That wasn't wrong. My father stood suddenly, his chair scraping loudly. Nina, he said, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? Privately. We're in the middle of the keynote speech, Dad, I replied. Questions from the audience first. We can talk after. He sat down heavily and my mother buried her face in her hands. More questions came. About specific technologies, about plans for expansion, about my decision to stay private rather than pursue an IPO. I answered them all professionally, aware that I was essentially conducting a business presentation at my parents' anniversary gala. Finally, James thanked me and invited me to stay on stage for the rest of the program. We had planned for several family members to share memories, he said, but given tonight's revelation, perhaps we should adjust the program? No, I said. Let's continue as planned. My parents' anniversary deserves to be celebrated. Their marriage, their achievements, their life together. Those things are real and valuable regardless of what's happened tonight. So the program continued. My uncle shared a funny story about my parents' wedding. My mother's college roommate talked about their enduring friendship. Colleagues from the hospital discussed my father's contributions to cardiology. Through it all, I sat on stage in my simple black dress, visible to everyone, impossible to ignore, while the family who'd hidden me in the back corner tried to process what they'd learned. When the formal program ended and guests began mingling for the after-party, I was immediately surrounded. Surgeons wanted to discuss technology improvements. Investors wanted to talk about funding opportunities. Young medical students wanted career advice. My parents stood at a distance, watching me interact with guest after guest, seeing me in a context they'd never witnessed. Confident, knowledgeable, respected. Finally, as the crowd around me thinned, my mother approached. She'd repaired her makeup, but her eyes were still red. Nina, she said quietly, I don't know where to start. How about with the truth? I suggested. Why did you introduce Stephanie as your successful daughter? She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring. Because it was easier. Because when people asked about my daughters, I could talk about Stephanie's achievements at Goldman Sachs and they'd be impressed. If I talked about you, I didn't know what to say. That you'd left medical school? That you worked in technology? It sounded like failure compared to what we'd hoped for you. So you erased me, I said. You literally claimed another woman as your daughter rather than admit your real daughter made choices you didn't understand. We didn't know, she protested. Nina, if we'd known about your company, about your success. You would have what? I interrupted. Been proud of me. Mom, I tried to tell you. Multiple times over multiple years. You weren't interested in listening because what I was doing didn't fit your definition of success. My father joined us, looking older than he had at the start of the evening. Nina, I owe you an apology. Several apologies. I called you a disappointment in front of colleagues I respect. I introduced your cousin as my daughter while you sat unnoticed in the back of the room. I judged your choices without ever asking for details. Yes, I agreed. You did all of those things. I was wrong, he said simply. About all of it. Nina, what you've built. It's extraordinary. It's beyond anything I could have imagined. Your technology is used in my hospital. I've assisted on surgeries using NexusNav. I've praised its innovation without knowing my own daughter created it. Did you ever wonder who invented it? I asked. He was quiet for a moment. No, he admitted. I assumed it came from some large company's research division. It never occurred to me that a single inventor, that you, could create something so sophisticated. Because you'd decided I'd failed, I said. You decided that leaving medical school meant giving up, so you stopped paying attention to what I was actually doing. We're sorry, my mother said, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, but I didn't squeeze back. Nina, we're so incredibly sorry. We failed you as parents. We should have supported you. We should have listened. We should have asked questions and actually heard the answers. Yes, I agreed again. You should have done all of those things. But you didn't. And now we're here at your anniversary gala, where 400 people just learned that the daughter you've been ashamed of is actually worth $750 million and has revolutionized modern surgery. I was never ashamed of you, my mother protested, but her voice was weak. Mom, you introduced another woman as your successful daughter, I said flatly. You told guests your real daughter wasted her medical degree. You seated me at table 42 as far from the main stage as physically possible. If that's not shame, what is it? She didn't have an answer. Stephanie approached, looking hesitant. Nina, can I talk to you for a minute? I nodded and we walked toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. I'm sorry, she said immediately. For going along with it tonight. For not correcting them. For letting them use me as a replacement for you. Stephanie, you don't need to apologize, I said. You didn't create this situation. But I benefited from it, she replied. I got praise and recognition that should have gone to you. I was introduced as the successful daughter while the actually successful daughter was hidden in the back. That's not right. You achieved real things, I reminded her. Partner at Goldman Sachs at 26? That's remarkable. You earned that. So did you earn your achievements, she countered. The difference is I got celebrated for mine while you got erased for yours. That's not about me versus you. That's about your parents' inability to see past their own expectations. I know, I said. But that's my issue to resolve with them, not yours. Will you, she asked. Resolve it with them, I mean. Or are you done with the family? I looked across the ballroom at my parents, who were now surrounded by guests offering congratulations mixed with confusion. People were processing the revelation, asking questions, trying to reconcile the narrative they'd been fed all evening with the reality that had just been revealed. I don't know yet, I admitted to Stephanie. Tonight was about making them see me. Making them understand what they'd dismissed. But whether we can rebuild from here, that's going to take time. Fair enough, she said. For what it's worth, I've always been impressed by you. What you've built is incredible. Thank you, I said. And congratulations on partner. I mean that. That's a huge achievement. We hugged and I felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. At least Stephanie and I were okay. The rest of the evening was surreal. Guests who'd ignored me earlier now wanted to talk business. Relatives who'd pitted me now asked about investment opportunities. Colleagues of my father who'd dismissed me as a dropout now requested meetings to discuss potential collaborations. Through it all, my parents watched from a distance, seeing me in this new light, trying to process the daughter they'd had all along but never bothered to see. As the gala finally wound down near midnight, I found myself alone on the balcony overlooking the city. My father found me there. "Nina," he said, stepping out into the cool night air, "can we talk now? Just the two of us." "Hey," I said. He stood beside me looking out at the city lights. "I'm a cardiologist," he began. "I've spent 30 years studying the human heart. Its structure, its functions, its diseases. I understand hearts better than almost anyone. But apparently, I know nothing about having one when it comes to my own daughter." "Dad." "Let me finish," he said gently. "I've performed thousands of surgeries. I've saved countless lives. I've built a respected career. But tonight I learned that while I was in operating rooms saving individual patients, my daughter was creating technology that helps thousands of surgeons save millions of patients. Your impact exceeds mine by orders of magnitude, and I've spent years calling you a disappointment." "You didn't know," I said, though the words felt hollow. "I should have known," he countered. "Or at least I should have asked. Nina, when you left medical school I was devastated. I'd imagined us as colleagues working together, maybe you joining my practice someday. When you walked away from that dream I took it personally. I assumed you were giving up, that you lacked the dedication for medicine." "I didn't lack dedication," I said. "I just found a different way to apply it." "I see that now," he said. "Your Nexus Nav system, Nina, it's brilliant. The integration of AR with real-time imaging, the haptic feedback, the intuitive interface. It's everything surgeons need but didn't know how to ask for. You took your medical knowledge and combined it with technical innovation to create something that's changing surgery itself." "Thank you," I said, surprised by the specific praise. "I've used your technology dozens of times," he continued. "I've praised it to colleagues, recommended it to other hospitals, written positive reviews in medical journals. I've been your biggest advocate in the medical community while being your biggest critic in the family. The irony isn't lost on me." We stood in silence for a moment, the sounds of the gala winding down, drifting through the open doors behind us. "Can I ask you something?" he said finally. "Why didn't you just tell us? Why go through tonight's revelation in front of 400 people? Why not sit us down privately and explain everything?" "Because I tried that," I replied. "Multiple times over multiple years. Every time I mentioned my company you changed the subject. Every time I tried to explain my work you dismissed it. Private conversations didn't work because you weren't listening. So tonight I made sure you had to listen. 400 witnesses meant you couldn't ignore it or dismiss it or pretend it wasn't happening." "That's fair," he admitted. "Harsh but fair. We deserved the public revelation after the public humiliation we put you through." "I'm not trying to punish you," I said. "I'm trying to be seen. For 8 years I've been invisible to this family. The daughter who failed, who wasted her potential, who wasn't worth discussing. Tonight I became visible. Whether that leads to a better relationship or just mutual acknowledgement remains to be seen." "I want it to lead to a better relationship," he said. "Nina, I want to know you. The real you, not the version I invented in my head. I want to understand your work, celebrate your achievements, be the father I should have been all along. Is that possible?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "That depends on whether you're willing to see me as I am rather than as you wish I was. Can you be proud of a daughter who founded a tech company instead of becoming a surgeon? Can you value innovation in technology as much as you value excellence in medicine? Can you accept that my path, while different from yours, is equally valuable?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "After tonight, how could I not? Nina, you've achieved more by 32 than most people achieve in a lifetime. You've revolutionized my field from the outside, which is somehow even more impressive than doing it from within. I am proud of you. I'm sorry it took a dramatic keynote speech for me to realize it, but I am genuinely, deeply proud." I felt tears prick at my eyes for the first time that evening. "Thank you," I whispered. "That's all I've ever wanted to hear." He pulled me into a hug and I let myself lean into it, let myself be his daughter again instead of the CEO maintaining her composure. "We have a lot of work to do," he said into my hair. "A lot of conversations to have, a lot of misunderstandings to clear up, a lot of time to make up for. But I want to do that work if you'll let me." "I'll let you," I said. "But it has to be real, Dad. Not just surface-level interest because now you know I'm successful. Real curiosity about my work, my life, my choices. Can you do that?" "I can," he promised. "And I will." We stood there on the balcony for a few more minutes, father and daughter, beginning the slow process of rebuilding what had been broken by assumption and pride. Inside, the gala was ending. Guests were gathering coats, saying goodbyes, undoubtedly already texting friends about the drama they'd witnessed. My mother found us on the balcony, her eyes questioning. "Can I join you?" she asked hesitantly. "Yes," I said. She stepped between us and my father put his arm around her. The three of us stood together, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire while they'd been busy being disappointed in me. "This isn't how I imagined tonight going," my mother said finally. "No," I agreed. "But maybe it's how it needed to go." "Maybe," she conceded. "Nina, I want to start over. Not erase what happened but move forward from here. Can we do that?" "We can try," I said. "But it's going to take time. Trust isn't rebuilt in one night, even a dramatic one." "We have time," my father said. "And we're going to use it better than we have been." As we left the ballroom together, parents and daughter finally on the same page even if we weren't yet on the same chapter, I felt something shift. The revelation had been dramatic, the confrontation had been public, but maybe, just maybe, it had been necessary. Sometimes you have to tear down the old narrative completely before you can build a new one. And as I walked out of the Metropolitan Hotel that night, no longer invisible, no longer dismissed, finally seen by the people whose opinion had mattered most, I allowed myself to hope that the rebuild might be worth the destruction. My simple black dress had cost $150. But the truth I'd revealed while wearing it? That was priceless.